Now, the 20-event women's series has come to a close. As we mentioned, Bo Greaves took the second spot at the World Championship, Lisa Ashton the first, as well as the spot in the Grand Slam. And this was the biggest women's series yet, not to mention the first ever women's world match play at the Winter Gardens. What's the state of the women's game as we near the end of 2022?
I think when we look back on 2022, turn the page to 2023, the ladies' game, it does feel like it is making some real progress. And of course, during the pandemic years, 2020, 2021, the ladies' game, it was hurt by that, wasn't it? There weren't a lot of opportunities, but we did see the women's series come out of the pandemic towards the end of 2019 or 2020. I can't remember now. The years have sort of blurred together now. But this year we've had the return of the WDF World Championship, and you'll hear from Bo in a moment, the reigning champion. She's keen to defend that title whenever and wherever that may be next year. But as far as the PDC, every credit to them. They've stepped up their commitment to the women's game. We've had the Women's World Match Play as well. That's going to be back next year. We're going to get 24 Women's Series events, so up 4 from this year. And the entries seem to be in a good place as well. I think we had around 92, 94, around that figure at the weekend. And I think that's the ballpark figure that the PDC are aiming for at the moment. And it'd be great to see them regularly hit 3 figures if we could get to that, and maybe even higher, maybe get a full 128 or getting the 140s, the 150s. I think that's got to be the goal, to keep pushing and get more ladies playing, and also ladies who have that ability to commit to it as well. And obviously Bo coming back into the fold in the last 2 weekends, that's made a big impact, because after 3 of the 5 weekends, Fallon Sherrick, she was in a strong position to take that second Ali Pally spot, but Bo's come in, gone 8 for 8 to take that spot. And yeah, I think that's going to be a real interesting battle next year. If all 3 play all the events next year, you'll have Lisa Ashton, Bo Greaves, Fallon Sherrick. You'd imagine they're going to be right up there again. And we've also got that race for the Women's World Match Play, which has started with the last 2 weekends. That will carry into next year. And at the minute you look at that lineup, the 3 I've mentioned, you've also got Mikuru Suzuki in there, Eileen de Graaf, Katie Sheldon, Lorraine Winstanley, Dieter Hedman. That's a pretty good lineup as far as names there. But of course, there'll be a lot of ladies that aren't far off that list at the moment that'll have other ideas. Your Robin Burns, Rhiannon O'Sullivan's, Laura Turner's, Anastasia's, Kirsty Hutchinson. So, yeah, there's a lot of names in there. And I think it is growing, that list of players that will feel like they're capable of doing some damage in these events. And I think it can't be underestimated, the PDC getting involved, the exposure that they've got, the audience that they've got putting all these events on the streams. But I think more importantly, the clips that we're getting on social media, there's a big audience there that the PDC already commands on there, and showing ladies darts can only be a good thing as well. And I think, yeah, these things, they do take time to grow. And the early years, there's been a few teething problems, but I think now as we're going forward into 2023, more events coming on board, it's a good time for the ladies' game. And you've got the 3 I mentioned there at the top at the moment. Young players are going to be looking up to them to try and emulate, and they've set the bar. It's up to the rest of the field now to put the hours in, put the work in, and try and catch them up. But I think that's an exciting challenge if you're a ladies player, is to see if you can get to those standards, try and beat these 3 players, get some wins. And yeah, I think the first question for 2023 is who's going to be the player that stops Bo Greaves' winning streak on the Women's Series, because 52-0, that's going to be a big result, whoever can pull that off.
Yeah, and we won't know that at least until 2023. From what we saw this year, there's no guarantee we'll find out next year either. But it was, I mean, you said a lot of what I was going to say, the increase in field size. And we talked about this during the pandemic as well. Like, it was tough to gauge just what the small field sizes meant, because it's a lot to ask someone in the middle of the pandemic to travel, especially when there's only a few players who seem to be able to have the game to win one of these events, or actually just one player who seems to have the game to win these events. So all things considered, a lot of players probably decided it's not my time to go test myself in this. This year we were seeing each event, other than the ones in Germany, get well over 64 players and sometimes close to 100. And that's a good sign. And while most of them didn't have any realistic chance to win the title, we did see players make the finals that we would have never thought at the beginning of the year, including Trina Gulliver, who returned to play and winning one of these. So there is a depth in the game that we might have forgotten after a couple years of the pandemic. They were talking in commentary, I can't remember if it was during the first or second final on Sunday, about, okay, it's obviously at least a big three, probably a big four in women's darts. For last year and for much of this year, we were saying was a big two, Lisa Ashton and Fallon Sherrick. But with the rise of Bo Greaves, especially now playing the PDC and winning all 8, as well as Mikuru Suzuki finding her game and making 5 of the last 8 finals, it really looks like a big four right now. Those 4 are the big faces. But there are other players who can still and do still contend and can, okay, it seems like no one can beat Bo Greaves, but can beat the other big 3 players and make deep runs. Aline de Graaf, who made the final of the women's world match play. Anastasia Dobromyslova, who hadn't played any of these for a variety of reasons until now, but still finished 7th highest average over the course of the tournament, despite obviously not being in her peak match form because she hadn't played for so long. Then you also had Dita Hedman, who played some of them. Rhian O'Sullivan, who really emerged this year after having not played that much competitive darts for the better part of a decade before this year. So we still have a lot of players in that second or third tier that are really good and are testing themselves and are improving and are getting closer to the best players. But it is a clear-cut, well, number one, and then a clear-cut second tier of Ashton, Suzuki, and Sherrick. That's a good place for women's darts to be right now, but it is something to grow on. This is, for a long time, like when Phil Taylor was at the best, and then there were a couple players on that second tier who could beat him on his day, but there wasn't the depth. There still isn't the depth, but it is improving. And as we're seeing more of the top women's players play the women's series, and we're seeing more of the second tier and third tier of players play that women's series, it's going to improve, and it's something to build on for next year. Bo Greaves will go into the year, obviously, with a very big target on her back.